Hello and welcome. I'm here with Darlene Marshall, and we have to start with the news. Congratulations, you are America's favorite trainer 2021. I want to ask, what does that mean to you?
It's been overwhelming for a lot of reasons. You spend a decade in any industry and you think you do a good job and your clients are happy, but to have and people I haven't worked with in years, people who were other trainers that I worked with back in the beginning of my time in the fitness industry coming out of the woodwork, it's been incredibly positive, but honestly a bit overwhelming.
Yeah. What what is it what does it say to have had so many different kinds of people? AFT was a voting initiative and you just had the support of so many, and so many left comments talking about the impact you've made on them as a personal trainer, talking about your impact as a life coach, people who you've worked with in a nonprofit sense, listeners of your podcast. What do you think it is that's drawing so many different kinds of folks?
Oh, I would like to think that it's a combination of the quality of content, the earnestness that I put it out into the world. I try to be really transparent and open with who I am and what I'm about. But what I really think it is the message, the idea that taking good care of ourselves, that wellness, well-being as a foundation go so far beyond what we're typically taught by the fitness industry that it's about so much more than looking good in your underwear. That it's about longevity and relationships and happiness and the power of movement and of nutrition, of good sleep to build the foundation of a rich and meaningful life. And I feel honored to get to be the vehicle for that message.
Yeah. So you grew up in a small town, Valley Falls, New York.
Yep.
Talk about the first time you remember loving movement.
Oh, what's funny? So I told you the other day that I just moved back to my hometown. And about a week after I moved home, my high school, one of my favorite teachers in high school, who was also the running coach, came by. I was in the yard. Her car came to a screeching halt and she jumped out and gave me a hug. And I've been reflecting since then that one of the first times I can remember running loving specifically was the first time I was in 7th grade. I had decided to join the cross country team because my brother did it. And she took me for a run. And that was probably the first time she taught me how to pace myself, because I always ran way too fast in the beginning, that I remember loving running. But I grew up with a really vibrant physical family culture. We were always playing outside. I have 2 older brothers. We grew up roughhousing. And so it never for me was a time that I didn't have that growing up. I played basketball from the time I was in, I think, 4th grade. So it was always just there. And then over time, the evolution of learning about how to structure it as part of a lifestyle was its own kind of separate journey.
When you think about that upbringing, how much of that do you think you have to start that young in order to really, do you think that's such an advantage? What do you think about how quickly you got into movement? It was bred, right from the start.
Well, I would say that physical activity definitely was a big part of our upbringing, but I would not necessarily say a healthy lifestyle was. So most of my family eats a standard, or has eaten, I'm happy to say I've swayed this a little bit, a standard American diet. Heart disease, diabetes, cancer, all run in my family. And I can tell you the long version of the origin story of how I became a trainer, but through college, I wasn't necessarily living a healthy lifestyle. And so by my 20s, I was actually in a lot of trouble in terms of my physicality and had to figure out a lot of it on my own.
So you talk about, so in college, but you go to study theater at the University of Albany as a thespian. What did you aspire to?
Oh, I thought I was going to be, so understand that I am 6 feet tall, but I thought I was going to be the only tall Christine on Broadway. Because even though I'm very tall, I'm an E over C soprano. So I was a really high soprano. I thought I was going to be on Broadway. That isn't clearly what happened. A lot of roadblocks got in the way, which is that story is how I became a trainer, actually.
What is that?
Yeah, let me tell you the story. So I played collegiate rugby at UAlbany. I was second row for 3 seasons, and I took to it like a duck to water. I loved rugby. But I didn't know at the time that I actually have a genetic disorder that predisposes me to joint dislocation. So by the time I was in my early 20s, I'd had injuries that most people don't even get, nonetheless get until their 60s or 70s. And at 23, I couldn't walk barefoot at all. I couldn't carry anything in my left arm without my shoulder starting to slide out of the socket. And my then husband was, one day I made a comment about getting older, and he's like, you should be fine at 23. You should go to the doctor. And that's when we found out I have this genetic disorder. The physical therapist that I was sent to essentially told me, you're never going to run again. You're never going to play sports again. You need to change your expectations for yourself. You have this very serious degenerative condition. You're going to be on the couch. And I fired her immediately. I went back to my orthopedist and said, we have a problem. And, this was 14 years ago. You couldn't just Google it. And I began just self-experimenting and trying to figure out, well, if I do this, how does my body react? Oh, that was a mistake. Do it this way. With his guidance and a lot of patience from my partner. But it was that journey. It took me 5 years to go from could not walk, had to put on sneakers to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, to being able to run a 5K. And when I finished the 5K, I cried because it was this huge journey. I'm getting the feelings. It was this huge journey from being told, give up, and just that athlete mentality of, okay, if training made me better at basketball, maybe training could make me better at the sport of living. And so when I became a trainer, my niche from the very beginning was working with people who had either significant chronic illnesses, or they'd had a catastrophic life-affecting injury. And so for the first 8 years of my career, while I did other kinds of training, they were my focus. And so if somebody came into the gym I was working for at the time and the membership advisor couldn't pronounce what they had, well, I was who they called into the office to talk to them.
That was the Darlene special.
That was the Darlene sandwich right there.
When you're talking about these years of trial and error, you talk about these mistakes you're making, this work, this hurt, what do you mean by that? What was that kind of process for you, and how did you get through it?
The clearest example, yeah, physically and emotionally. I know being in the mental health category, even though I'm not a clinician, I know a lot about the intimate connection between the body and our mental health. And that period in my life came with some pretty significant depression and anxiety and a lot of fear about what my future was going to be like. So probably the clearest example of that kind of experimentation, my physician really wanted me to be getting more cardiovascular exercise. He was concerned about how sedentary I'd become because I had to have a couple of surgeries. And so we thought, okay, I'll use the stationary bike. But when I got on the upright bicycle, my musculature in my hips was so deteriorated and misaligned that my left hip started to slide out of the socket and I impinged a nerve and I couldn't walk for a few days. But okay, that was clearly the wrong thing. What if I use a recumbent bike? Because then I'm not seated up. And so then I had to use the recumbent bike. And then over time, I was able to build the strength in my hip to be able to use the upright bike, and on and on and on. But it's that kind of, okay, I do a little test. Nope, that was wrong. Okay, how do I make it even simpler? How do I make it even easier? How do I roll it back 2 steps till it's safe? And this is the same this is the same process that I use with my own clients. That, okay, that wasn't a failure. That was a misstep. We learned something important. Let's try it this way with the new information we now have, which is also the process we use with any science, right? It's the science of yourself.
That's, one of the things that just remind me of is this real guess and check that can come with your own body. Just you're figuring out what works for your body, what doesn't. For being in an industry that is so results oriented, and results can look a lot of different ways, setbacks can be tough because it means you have to wait to find out what is actually going to work. Is that something that you feel has been part of it?
Yeah, I think it can be. But when you talk about results, I think it's really helpful for us as individuals and as fitness professionals to remember that there's more than one kind. And so often as fitness professionals, we focus on the objective outcome, right? What's measurable? Body fat, weight, pound, weight moved, weight lost, weight gained, muscle mass, and BMI and body comp and all of that. Or run speed, right? Race times. Those are all objective outcomes. But equally important, or sometimes more important, is the subjective outcome. How do you feel? It's purely subjective, right? It's purely up to the individual. But oftentimes when I'm coaching a client on their well-being, it has way less to do with, well, how many reps did you do? And way more to do with, how do you feel about yourself, about your efforts? What does your emotional landscape look like? Those are all highly subjective. So if we're only measuring the objective, we're missing the whole mental, spiritual, emotional component that is the human that you're working with. So I try to make sure that for every objective measure I have with a client that they're focused on, we agree on a subjective outcome that they find equally important. Like, how do they want to feel when they wake up in the morning? Or what would it mean to be able to carry their groceries themselves, and everything in between.
One of I want to read a comment someone left for you, which said, as an individual who suffers from severe anxiety, depressive disorders, mental health ailments, it's the combination of physical exercise, positivity through a psychological lens, where you factually helped and should be held in high regard. This obviously leads into your work in positive psychology. And you asked me a question, which is, how do you feel today? And that is, of course, the go-to question in mental health. Where did that start? How did you get there? And what does it mean to incorporate a master's degree in psychology into personal fitness?
Yeah, so I was a trainer first. I've been in the fitness industry for 10 years. But 3 years ago, I amicably split with the person I'd been with for 15 years. And it was truly amicable. But even when you're splitting with your partner for reasons that benefit you both, it's still sad and it's still really hard. And a friend of mine was taking an online course in positive psychology and said, hey, you could probably use the science of happiness stuff. And they were totally right. But along the way of doing this course, I thought, God, I have so many clients that would benefit from this. Why aren't we shouting this from the rooftops? Like, there's a lot here. And so I started, of course, like trainer brain. I'm sure any fitness professional listening to this will say, like, oh yeah, I know that feeling, where you just try to find every bit of information you can on that new modality that you discovered. And in this case, that modality was positive psychology. And in one of the books I was reading, Martin Seligman, who is the founding father of positive psychology as we know it, talks about the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology program at Penn. And he says that the number one criteria for anyone being accepted into the program is that they believe they have a sense of calling to be there. And I got chills in my whole body. And I just knew I'm supposed to go do this. But in my head, I'm thinking, why would they want me? I'm just a trainer. But I didn't understand then what I know now, which is not only is positive psychology the science of well-being, but the applied part is that you want to share that science with practitioners who are from all walks of life so that they can become carrier pigeons out into the world. Because positive psychology, isn't about what's wrong with us. Traditional psychology is about fixing what's mentally off in people, right? Whereas the absence of the bad, right? We could fix the depression, we could fix the anxiety, we could give you drugs for bipolar disorder, but if that brings you to neutral, well, that's not flourishing either. This is why my podcast is called Better Than Fine. Like, you could be fine, but that's not the same as being really good. And so it's not necessarily a therapist who you go to when you want to learn how to live a life full of meaning and purpose and vitality and to really flourish. And that's where positive psychology, I think, is the next big tool for the fitness professional, because we're the ones who are out there trying to help people live their best versions of themselves actively in their lives.
When you're in your cohort, in your program, the other students that you're at UPenn with, did you feel unique? Did you feel out of place? Did they feel out of place?
We all did. There's horrible imposter syndrome there. Partly because, honestly, if you're in a room full of positive psychology practitioners, you've never been in a happier, nicer room. Like, everyone is so nice and just genuinely kind and genuinely wants each other to win. I would say of everyone in my life, other than my own immediate family, probably my positive psychology classmates have been the most active in congratulating me this week. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. I walked in day one with the story in the back of my head. I'm just a trainer. Why am I here? I'm just a trainer. And I think day two, I went to one of the assistant instructors and I was like, I think they made a mistake. Like, because everyone in that room was so exceptional. And it's very easy in that moment to tell yourself you're not when you are. And so there are a handful of other fitness professionals who've done that program. They are mostly group fitness, I should say they are group fitness instructors primarily, a couple of yoga instructors, but I am the only active certified personal trainer. I'm a unicorn. And I joke with kind of everyone in positive psychology that we are the unicorn convention, because everyone is coming from a very unique lens into positive psychology and then bringing it back with them. So while there are cohorts around, corporate productivity, restructuring, meaning, purpose, there's an education cohort that they're kind of, teachers and that bent. The fitness side, there are very few of us in the world. And it is a weird thing to be the one. And though it's very cool because it's a ton of opportunity there to bring something desperately needed, I think, into the fitness industry.
When you had to go get a master's degree from an Ivy League school to become experienced in positive psychology, how do the teachings of what you learned get distributed to the selection of personal trainers that may not even think to do that?
Well, I'd say for someone who's interested on the surface level, there's a few great online courses. So you could take the Coursera Science of Happiness course out of Yale. The instructor is Laurie Santos. That's the first one that I took. There's a bunch of great positive psychology books. If you are interested specifically around movement and wellness outside of that aesthetics lens, I would say read the book Joy of Movement by Kelly McGonigal. And I know that there is a few cool projects coming down the line. So you can follow me on Instagram and find out in about 6 or 8 months.
Yeah. What, so let's talk about your podcast. You're the host of the Better Than Fine podcast. You've interviewed guests like Don Miguel Ruiz, author of the 4 Agreements, health coaches, personal trainers, psychologists. What really brought you to start that? Who are you trying to reach?
Well, I want to be clear. I didn't interview Don Miguel Ruiz, but he's welcome to come on the show anytime he likes. I just talked about the book. A lot of my inspiration to start the show was actually the nudging of people from MAP, from the Masters in Applied Positive Psychology. A number of people had told me that they thought that I should do it. And I'd been thinking about it for a couple of years, but I'd had a YouTube channel. It didn't really go anywhere. I'd had a couple of online content creation things and just, I was dragging my feet out of fear, to be honest. But I launched the show a few weeks before lockdown came to the US. And my original intentions for the show changed very quickly. From being a vehicle for you can build a better life, to, hey, we're all going through this really hard thing together. Let's work on getting through it together in a positive way. And it's been, for lack of a better word, it's been awesome. I would say, to name drop a guest, Brigadier General Rhonda Cornum was the impetus behind one of the largest resilience training programs in the world, the longest running, the most people, which is in the US Army, the Comprehensive Soldier Fitness Program. She brought resilience to the US Army because she saw that so many of our soldiers were suffering from PTSD, depression, suicidal ideation, and believed that the science of resilience could help to shore them up. And it's been gone through multiple iterations of varying success, but it's still an incredible achievement. And so I'm the only podcast she's ever done, and it was a great honor to have her. Nick Marks, when he was on the show, he actually read fresh data that he just pulled off that showed that people who'd been taught positive psychology skills were not susceptible to depression and anxiety recurrence during iterative lockdowns. So his data pool was people in the UK. And as we know, they've gone through multiple waves of lockdown.
Yeah.
But the people that his company had trained on positive psychology skills as individuals and within their groups at work did not suffer in the same way that, the general population did. Well, that's pretty incredible. And if we know that, we can use that, right? And in addition to that, I've had a number of fitness professionals. I've had Dr. Elaine O'Brien, who was the first fitness professional to get a MAP degree. She's a dance fitness instructor and a huge inspiration of mine, talking about what is positive movement. And she was one of the people that baked that idea. So it's been a great vehicle to share. And then, also I have people reach out all the time and say, oh, I've listened to that episode on self-love 5 times because I'm really struggling. And to have a free tool out there for people who need it when they need it is deeply validating and humbling that, I can just do that from my office,
That connection that you're building with people, in what ways does it feel different than being in person? Because it's still really meaningful to have a connection, even virtually. Do you find that you're trying to get virtual people to meet you in person, or, what is it like to have that kind of different setup?
Well, working in a really physical field with a chronic illness, I'll start that answer over because I think I can say it better. We all struggle with the confines of how many hours in a day you can do whatever the thing is you're here to do. And being in a body that is genetically different than other people, I feel those constraints a little faster than others. So I always knew that I couldn't train as many clients as some of my peers. And back when I was working in a box gym, I would see my peers do 10 sessions in a day. And after 7, I would struggle to stand up. And they didn't know, but I knew that that was happening to me. And so I was always aware that I had to be mindful of how many clients can I really have. And that means that there's a limit on how many people I can really help. And I would always struggle with that scale of scope. And I think one of the things that being virtual, so, I teach corporate workshops virtually, I have the show through my content creation through Instagram. All of these are different channels where I can have touch points and lives that I may never meet in person, but it helps me with those confines of, okay, I can only spend so many hours coaching because my body can't do more than that. But here's a way that I can meaningfully help people outside of that.
Who is it that you're looking to reach with virtual? Who are you creating content for?
Humans, humans with bodies. If I have to go deeper than that, I'd say people who understand that what we're talking about in a national conversation, at least here in America, about fitness and nutrition and health, it doesn't really work for them, right? Severe calorie restriction, shame, blame, feeling bad about yourself, being told by your doctor that you're too fat, you have to lose weight, move more, eat less. For some reason, it doesn't land on them and they don't know what to do next. That's my ideal person who I want to catch in that moment that they feel let down or distraught and say, hey, it doesn't have to be that way. You are allowed to care about yourself. You can eat and fuel your body in ways that nourish you. You can get a good night's sleep, and you can have movement that doesn't feel limiting or painful or even unpleasant, because there is another way to do this. And I know because I've lived that way and I've coached people that way, and we've gotten through it together. But outside of that ideal, embodied well-being, it's this idea that we all have bodies, and everything you're ever going to contribute to the world comes through your physical self. So if you nurture and care for that physical self, everything you offer the world is better for it. And that's a whole different intention than like, hey, you want to look good on the beach?
Feel that. I feel that for sure. What, you chose to support the Travis Manion Foundation. How'd you first get connected with them? What was it about their mission that drew you in?
They were my service learning project for grad school, but I did get to choose, and I chose them. I made one selection, and we were given options. So I was like, no, I want TMF. And there's a few reasons. So Travis Manion himself actually knew one of my friends when he was in school, and he passed away on deployment. And so it was very close to my heart that easily could have been someone I cared about. And for many people, TMF doesn't only serve our veterans, they serve our Gold Star families. And for anyone who doesn't know, a Gold Star family is someone who lost their service person in combat. As the daughter of a Vietnam veteran, as the partner to someone who served in the US Navy, it's very near and dear to me that those people have lost the person that they love, and how heavy that is. And what TMF does is uses all of these great tools of positive psychology, everything I've been going on about, to empower those people who need it the most in a moment that you've either retired from service. So, okay, who am I now if I'm not career military? Or you've lost your service person and you're lost in some way without them. And teaches these skills to that population so that they can then turn around and serve it in their own communities. So very often that means in school programming, where they're going into schools and teaching youth about the strength of character and how to live a good life. It means empowering community leaders for Habitat for Humanity to run community fundraiser runs, all kinds of community service initiatives, so that population whose service matters so much to them is empowered to continue serving in a new way to make us all better. And so you are like serving the server in a lot of ways. And so I've been able to continue volunteering with TMF. I feel very strongly about TMF. And honestly, like all of the other people who are really into positive psychology, they're just wonderful people. They're kind and generous and open-hearted, and they're the kind of people you want to help.
Do you train any veterans?
I am trying to think if I train any currently. Well, other than my dad and my partner.
Your partner lets you train them?
Oh, no, that was a joke. So my partner, peek behind the curtain, my partner's name is Matthew. And when I was first a brand new baby trainer, he'd already been a trainer for 13 years. And he was already working with, the sick and injured. We called them special populations. And when I very first became a trainer, I saw what he could do and how gifted he is in understanding the human body and movement. And I thought, that's who I want to be like. He is the go-to guy when someone's sick or hurt. Teach me everything you know. And so it took us 10 years to get together. But he, like I say, he was in the US Navy. He's been a trainer for 22 years. He's a genius. So no, he doesn't need my help.
That's great. That's great. I know you're on BurnAlong. You signed up a little bit ago. Wanted to know why did you use BurnAlong?
I think it's a really interesting opportunity for fitness professionals. And having been in the industry for 10 years, I know that, what is it? The attrition for a personal trainer is you lose 30% in the first 90 days. So someone finishes their cert, they don't know how to build a business, they struggle to make an income, and they have to go do something else. You lose the next 30% in the first 2 years. So maybe they get their initial business, but they don't know how to sustain it. They continue to struggle. And then that last 30%, we kind of hang on for a while, but there can be a tail. And so I think it provides a real opportunity to fitness professionals to find a new way to generate revenue. Obviously, I've already mentioned how much I appreciate the scope of impact you can have. And while my content might be a little different, it's still the same set of parameters of you genuinely want to help people. You're looking for a way to do that sustainably for the long run and to help as many people as you possibly can. And as a personal trainer, I'm not a group fitness instructor, so I'm used to working one-on-one. So the content's a little bit different, but the opportunity is still really there.
You, last question before we go. You are a mental health expert, personal trainer first, mental health expert as well. And you've been now selected as the first, America's favorite trainer to actually have this mental health background. What do you think that says?
I think being the first and coming from a mental lens says that we're looking for something different. That as much as it is positive to celebrate someone who's got a great physique and maybe they have a fantastic genetic gift, but they've worked really hard to look a certain way, at the same time, there's so much more that movement and wellness can offer us as people. And I hope that it says that people are ready for that. They're ready to learn about the way that movement changes the brain, that it boosts your mood, that it makes you more productive, more creative, that it helps you focus when you're struggling, and that it decreases depression recurrence. You can use it as a tool when you're having an anxiety attack. There's all of this great information out there about what movement can do for your overall wellness and well-being. Not just how you look or how you feel in your body, but how you feel in your feelings. And I'm excited to get to carry that message out because of this opportunity.
That's great. Darlene, really, really appreciate you being able to tell your story. It's been really a pleasure. We're so glad to have you on BurnAlong. We're so glad to be able to celebrate you as America's favorite trainer. How can folks connect with you?
Say what?
How can folks connect with you?
Oh, missed me at the end there, Kevin. Well, you can find me on Instagram. I'm at darlene.coach. You are welcome to shoot me an email. That's info@darlene.coach. And my website, wait for it, is darlene.coach.
Beautiful. Awesome.
And may I just plug the show? You can find Better Than Fine on pretty much every podcast streaming platform or betterthanfinepodcast.com.
That is wonderful. Everyone go check that out. Darlene, thank you so much for your time.